You have talked about politics being Barack's dream, but not your dream. Are there moments in this campaign, or have there been moments where you said, what are we doing here? This is grueling.
Oh, yeah. No, every day.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, there's nothing rational about politics. And I say this a lot of times in my stump. I say, you know,
kind of a strange position for someone whose husband's running to be president.
Right, but it's also honest, I think. And I think people should understand, you know, not out of a sense of sympathy, but I think the truth is that most Americans don't opt into this. And it's not because they don't want to help the country. It's just that this is a pretty taxing way to do it. But with that said, I also say this has been one of the most worthwhile things that I've ever done in my life.
What makes it worthwhile?
You know, you don't get an opportunity to travel around the country, to go into people's homes, into their communities, into their barbershops and beauty shops, and to talk. That's part of our challenge in this nation, is that we are so isolated from one another. And that isolation just reinforces what we perceive to be divisions. But the truth is that when you sit down and talk to people, have a conversation, you make a joke, you're working in the same environment, you realize that folks are suffering the same challenges, they have the same hopes and dreams. Folks are not that far apart, and it's reassuring to be reminded that there is more that unites us than divides us, because it makes you hopeful that with better leadership, you can get people to recognize the work that we can do together.
Did you support Barack's presidential ambitions from the get-go?
No, it took a little while. It took a little while.
Did you say, no, honey?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
No.
I said, no, you can't be serious. Because we had just come off of a few years ago a tough U.S. Senate race, and you know, in your mind, you're sort of like, okay, that was one really hard thing that we did, and now we're done. We're gonna press the easy button for a little while, right? I knew he couldn't stay there for a long time. Barack doesn't do anything that's not easy.
What made you come around? What was his convincing argument that you're now on the campaign trail?
Well, first there were sort of, you know, hurdles, practical hurdles. How does this work? How do we structure it? How do I, you know, negotiate my work? Financially, how do we make this happen? How will the kids feel? You know, so there were a whole list of those kind of really practical things. And then when those were answered satisfactorily, then it became, what's going on in me, right? Why am I afraid of this?
Why were you afraid of it?
Because I am, like most Americans, cynical about what you can do, and there was a level of selfishness. This is going to be hard for me, you know. But when I took off those hats and started thinking and hoping and dreaming for the things I would want for this country and the kind of leadership that I'd be looking for, I thought, if I weren't married to Barack, I would desperately want him to do this. So the sacrifice that I'm going to have to make, you know, the little burdens that we're going to have to overcome are nothing compared to what I think he can do. So ultimately, I became more selfless about thinking about the future of the country, and I started thinking about my girls.
Yeah, well, about your girls. I mean, you know, you look at modern day presidents, and you think Amy Carter, hounded by the press, Chelsea Clinton, mocked by Saturday Night Live, the Bush twins, you know, people blogging about where they saw them with pictures. You know, they couldn't do one thing without the media being right in their faces all the time.
Right.
Are you worried about that? Your girls are, what, 6 and 9?
Yeah, no, we think about it often, but we've done the best that we can do to keep their lives as normal as possible for as long as possible. That's one of the reasons why we've kept their routines on track throughout this process. They're not on the campaign trail with us. When they're with us, it's usually because they're on break, or they've decided this trip sounds interesting, which has been never. They have never found anything that we are trying to do interesting at all. They prefer to be going to their birthday parties and their play dates. And because they're still in their world, we've lived on the south side of Chicago all their lives. They're in the same school that they've always been in. They have the friends that they've always had.
Which would all change if you move into the White House.
And I think my 9-year-old is has a little trepidation because of that. I think she realizes that. But we're going to have to work through that. But you're right, it will all change. And we're going to do our best to make sure that we protect them and make sure that they continue to be the center of our lives, even in the midst of all this turmoil. But we're going to have to work really hard to make that happen. And in the midst of this campaign, what I've done is I don't campaign every day. I'm not gone for weeks on end. I will not go on a trip that will have me away for more than 2 days.